So you can put down the sutra books. Just put them aside. Although you may find very good things in them if you do look through them. There is that. So look, please forgive my croaky throat at times. It's just asthma. It comes and goes. So please bear with me with that. So what I'd like to touch into tonight and completely get rid of is the word method. So you've probably heard Zen spoken of as the method of no method. No method. So what's the no in front of this word method? No method. It's not quite the same as it does not have a method. That is there. But it goes further. It's inviting us to find that energy of no method. We walk this cliff edge of birth and death with no method. At the deepest level of our being, there's no method. So the first case that I want to bring up is tiny. It's just as this. A monk came and asked Jiao, what is your intention? Jiao would have been very old, somewhere between 80 and 120. His dates are remarkable. And they're verified as well. So what is your intention? This monk is really asking Jiao to reveal himself fully, explain it entirely, hand it over, actually, hand over the secret. He's virtually saying. Jiao says, there is no method in it. So, what are we going to do with this no method? Bequeathed to us at this point by a 7th century master, Jiao, old Jiao. In Japanese, you might have met him as Joshu. Jiao is the pinyin way of the more, approved way of transliterating names into English. So, Jiao. And Jiao tends to come with me these days. I've been spending a lot of time in his company for the last, decades of my life. Don't forget, he bequeathed us mu, this one-word gate. Not, no, is not. So there it is, the dynamic no again, which is inviting us really to see right through ourselves. To see right through ourselves, not in the sense of working out all the ways we have made ourselves up, although they do come to light in the process of working with mu. But inviting us to see through ourselves as in the very self becomes transparent to the whole of what is here. No barrier. Completely transparent. Now this is a kind of wonderful idea. It's even more wondrous as direct and in a way most ordinary experience. Most ordinary because those kinds of realization experiences are somehow deeply familiar. You've always known this when it opens up. It's radical and strangely familiar. So you can trust it. It already is innate in you. So there is no method in it. Well, Hongzhi, he's an 11th century teacher from the Shikantaza side of our tradition. The just sitting, Soto, is Japanese form. Sadong is the Chinese way of saying Soto. But the whole point of this is it's not separate from Jiaozhou's irreducible mu and the path that opens there. The fact that it's not separate is borne out in the very tradition you find yourself in here in this room, because the tradition that comes down from Robert Aitken, who we venerate in the sutras, comes down through a Saodong or Soto school that reopened itself to the so-called Rinzai school, the school or tradition or path of koan inquiry. More or less said, why should you stand on one foot when you have 2 feet and can walk with 2 feet? So we discover the dynamic inquiry that is koan inquiry inside shikantaza. And we realize shikantaza ever more deeply through the koan path. Because we, sorry about this, we realize our soft nature, and shikantaza then reveals itself more and more fully. But Hongzhi is one of those ones who puts things in very mild form. He doesn't say awful things like mu, not, does not, is not, don't. In other words, don't do yourself, he's saying. Hongzhi says, simply clarify how this illusory mind melts. There's a lot of life experience in that word, simply. Simply clarify. Clarify means see clearly. Let it become clear. Simply let it become clear how this illusory mind melts. A little bit like let it become transparent to reality. So shikantaza is exactly on the same deeply intent path. It's, excuse me about this, you could say that its mood is different. The book that Hongzhi is collected, the book of koans that he collected, is called the Book of Equanimity, the Book of Serenity, sometimes translated that way. So you can see it's very even-minded, equanimity, even-mindedness, very, very even, steady-mindedness. So there's more fire, if you like, in the koan stream of practice. And there is a kind of deeply receptive mind in shikantaza. They both turn out to recognize each other profoundly. Not two. Once again, not two. So I said this morning, at some point, I think, in the encouraging words, I quoted women who said, because it is so very plain, it takes so long to see. Because it is so completely in front of us, we have long ago taken it for granted and turned it into a whole set of, in a way, theories called things. This thing, that thing, endless theorizing, that we call walking around like ordinary people, being real. And because it is so very plain, it takes so long to see. We have to see past this human, you could call it a gift, not a terribly welcome gift at times, of discerning and analysing and breaking up the wholeness of reality. And then, with a kind of sleight of hand, replacing that for what this is. So we have a kind of constructed world in our heads that we mistake for what this is. And all the time, It is asking us to come home right where we are and wondering, why are we so subtly estranged from right where we are? So there is a kind of silence at the heart of Zen. It will never deliver this matter up. How can it when it is what is? It's far beyond the reach, the reach of the kinds of words that will want to shrink it into something that can be handled and handed across and approached that way. So no Teisho can serve it up to you. A Teisho can cause echoes of it to ripple and be heard inside you. But in a way it comes down to not a single word, even though mu is a single word. We'll put that aside for now, because it is a word that undoes itself. It undoes words. There's actually a very interesting character. His name is Richard von Sturmer. He's a long-time Zen practitioner and student in Auckland, Auckland Zendo. And he wrote a whole series of little capping verses for some of the cases in the Book of Serenity, the Book of Equanimity. And this is one of them. I'm just picking a couple of them out for this evening because I love them very much. They are so direct and playful and instructive at the same time. So this one says, "One giant silverfish eats through the ancestral library. His Royal Highness turns pages in his sleep, translucent pages sparking with dust motes. But in the end, he fails to find a single word." So think of it. I'll read it again just so you can catch its offer. "One giant silverfish eats through the ancestral library. His Royal Highness," who by the way is not separate or other than you, you are the Royal Highness, "who turns pages in your sleep, translucent pages sparking with dust motes." Look how dusty talk about Zen can grow, how quickly it can. How many words have piled up, effectively saying it can't be talked about, it can't be explained. But in the end, he fails to find a single word, and that is a wonderful place to arrive at. Not a single word. When people do open up in this practice, they don't have many words. When Dogen had a huge experience, he was in the dojo in the early morning, semi-dark, and his teacher, who had said this many times before, said, "Body and mind drops away." The dropped away body and mind. Now, body and mind is a way of saying self. The character for self implies body and mind. So in a way he's saying the dropped away self. So having heard this how many times I don't know, but on this occasion Dogen was shattered by those words, just went right through him. And all he could do was make his way, when he could, to his teacher in Doksan. His teacher immediately saw what state he was in. And all that Dogen could say was the dropped away body and mind. Dropped away, dropped away. And he was somewhere suspended between joy and grief. Not grief for the dropped away body and mind. Probably the tinge of grief in that kind of moment is really grief for the fact we have spent an eon keeping ourselves apart from this, a lifetime alienated from this. But it's just as much joy. In fact, it probably should be called grievous joy, because they can't be told apart. Joy has no trouble, including grief. None at all. Okay, so why no method? What is this no method? You know, in many monasteries, there's a stupa outside, and maybe several stupas. And what do you do with a stupa? You circumnavigate it. It's almost as though you can't approach it directly and do anything at all with it, but you can circumnavigate it, walk around it, venerate it by walking around it. Just like sacred mountains, like Mount Kailash. Nobody climbs up to the top of Mount Kailash. People circumnavigate it, walk around it. Sometimes at different levels, in the case of Mount Kailash. There's a mountain not too far from the Sydney Zen Centre dojo, or rather retreat centre, out in the bush, past Wiseman's Ferry, a long way past. Maybe some of you have been to it, I'm not sure. But that mountain is called Yengo. It's actually a flat-topped mountain, a little bit like a mesa, you know, it rises up and then has a flat top. It's understood that that is the place where Bayami leapt off from Earth after creating everything, so it flattened the mountain a little bit. Understandable, really. So Yengo is a mountain that nobody ever goes onto, but every sacred site surrounding Yengo for miles is Yengo facing. They're all oriented towards Yengo. And then we made the wonderful discovery, I found a word list, a Dakunyong word list, and it had Yengo. And Yengo means right here. So I rest my case. There it is, right here, the sacred mountain. You're sitting on it. So this is an act of veneration to sit. You are venerating the fact of the sacred mountain called right here. You're agreeing to enter it, as in place yourself at least in proximity to it, as close as it will let you, or rather as you will let it. It's really hard to tell the difference between our resistance and reality at times. So keep that in mind and always question your resistance. Go a little further than you think your resistance will allow. And then you're in the place of no resistance. It's always surprising. But I'd like to explore this sense of not knowing and no method as having something to do with each other. Obviously, if there's no method, you can't know a path. You can't set it out and say, I now know what it is, I'll walk that, I'll get there, as though there was something to get to, apart from here. So not knowing is an active state of practice. It takes everything we are. At the same time, it is, in a sense, really, as I've sort of already implied, it is actually the deep yearning to see right through this self, to resolve the koan, if you like, of this very self, this sense of self, which has remarkable powers of replacing the entire universe with itself. So, maybe there's an analogy here, if you want to sort of get a handle on not knowing. Think about the way when you pick up a pencil and it's time to draw, immediately, of course, you say, I can't draw. Well, some of us say, I can't draw. If you say, I can't draw, best you'll be able to do is draw your thinking. You'll be able to draw your pre-thought idea of a flower, your pre-thought idea of a this or a that. But when you draw with the mind of simply seeing it without a single thought in front of it, that's a bit of an analogy for this feeling or this practice of not thinking yourself up, not thinking the moment up, not replacing the moment with what is really happening. And shikantaza is a complete and unabridged exposure of this very self to just what is happening, just as it is. So there's no thinking of it up. Shikantaza often translates as nothing but sitting or just sitting. So there's nothing added to this, not a single concept, not a single method, not even a single intention is added to this. It doesn't have the intention of a profound state. It recognizes that to sit completely open is a profound state for human beings. It's also a natural state, profoundly natural, you might say. Possibly the most natural state we ever find our way into. So, nothing but sitting. Can you hear how, at one level, how stringent that is? On the other hand, how simple it is. It's saying, just do nothing but sitting. And keep finding out how much tries to occupy that space. It doesn't take long to notice. So letting go of everything, this is the price of admission, relinquishment, let go of everything. Another word for it, a beginning word for it anyway, is relaxation. Relaxing into it. It is the basis of shikantaza, but it's a relaxing of this sense of self-important self to begin with. It's relaxing past the desire to pre-know, to know in advance, to claim with a knowing mind what is happening. It is letting reality reveal itself without our fingerprints on it, as directly as is possible. And of course it starts in the body, this very body, the Buddha, as we say, because the body is already completely belonging to right where we are. How can it not? I guess you could say it easily cannot when you're locked inside screen world, the world of a screen, which is nowhere in particular, it's a kind of elsewhere, always available. Anything but here. When I see people walking around wrapped in their little screens, I have no idea why they would replace this with this. Why? So it begins really with finding a posture that is sufficiently stable and comfortable. Now, stable qualifies comfortable, because to find stability can be a subtle matter of really exploring posture, discovering how your body sits, discovering that it has a reassuring weight on the cushion and enjoying that, like there's a lot of moving into the stable and comfortable fact of your body. And then comes the word relax, but it's not so much an action, it's not the verb to relax. It's more like the verb to experience relaxing as you allow it. And so you experience relaxing. You can do this really methodically, relaxing your scalp and experience that relaxing. Likewise for your forehead. The forehead contains a lot of fraught energy. It's taking care of so much business. It's sort of almost out of control with lots of people. No wonder we need Botox to sort of make it disappear altogether. So then your eyeballs, just notice how much your eyes can physically relax. Almost like your internal gaze softens. Likewise your face. You almost, in a sense, let your face go. Think how much face is a kind of public idea. Keeping your face, right? Keeping a public face. It comes so close to mask, persona. And it can become a mask you can't take off. So it is a sort of softening even of the muscles of the face. As I've mentioned to a few people, Thich Nhat Hanh always recommended that you slightly allow your face to smile, because that is the most relaxed a face can be. But that also changes your mood. It changes your mood to smile. So soften your face. Feel the letting go-ness at each of these stages. You let your neck and shoulders and arms and back and chest and abdomen and lower abdomen and buttocks and legs and until finally you are just feeling the entire yesness of your body. It is a kind of state of yes, 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 thank you. It's like a flow, because you're now accepting what is happening, accepting what is. You're not holding on to anything. You're not holding on to any preconception. A lot of muscular tension is a kind of preconception, a state of preconception, a thinking up of how your body should be. And it takes a lot of work sometimes to even find that out and notice it, and therefore be able to let it go. And then it is maintaining the clearest of possible awareness moment by moment. And I say awareness, but I'm really saying also enjoyment of that awareness. It's not a cold awareness, it's not clinical at all. It's infused with a warm kind of yes, good. I once heard a person sending up a meditation teacher, and every time someone approached them, the person would say, whatever they came up with, I'm really troubled, I don't know what to do. Good, good. That was the presentation for every single problem. Well, and it is, actually, and it is. Because that's where your body wants to be. Just in that state of, even to reasons for mortal fear, there is a certain, of course the body is immediately alert, but even that ability to be alert has a kind of good in it, good. So this is your mind coming much more, not just into sync with your body, but into agreement, deep agreement, body and mind, in agreement. It's like your mind finally fitting your very body, the body we have. Now this is also, when I talk about going through letting this progressive sort of sense of experience of very relaxing, of letting go, of relinquishment, it's not a visualization exercise. You don't have to mentally image the parts of your body. You just keep feeling and enjoying the sense of those muscles softening. And with that, your mind is softening, your mind is relaxing. Your gaze into the world, inwardly as well, is softer. It is receptive. And of course, you can't try to relax. You can't put the word try alongside the word relax. If you're trying to relax, you're already tense. The very word is tense. And it's full of self. And it is untrusting towards the body's innate ability to relax. It does not yet trust it. I must try. I must get past it. The value of noticing how much you're trying is that it does reveal how we create suffering for ourselves. And to that extent, it is always valuable to pay close attention to that. So it is really about letting naturalness carry us, you know. It is like, as I said this morning, offering yourself, I'm all yours, to just what is, and being received by just what is. Completely given back, I'm all yours. There's no barrier. So it is actually experiencing where Mu, the practice of Mu, with Mu, takes us to that point of no barrier at all. So does this far more continuous exploratory practice of Shikantaza take us to that same no barrier. It's not a mental realization. It is, again, an experience. You're now sitting as a being that is not barricaded against the world in any way. And it's enjoyable. It's a beautifully enjoyable body of being. Gilly shows it all the time. She just never stops showing how to do it. Okay, so it's Shikantaza itself that is often called the method of no method. And you can see how much we need to bring a checking of any kind of attempt to methodize this for it to flow. Everything we try to bring to bear as an intention is already a diversion, a kind of deviation from getting out of its way. Getting out of its way. It is a fundamentally non-directed state of being that we're looking for with Shikantaza. Nevertheless, there are steps into this stage, gradations, if you like, graduations into it. But each so-called step disappears into it. It doesn't leave traces. There are actually no steps. It's just that you're relinquishing more, and then a little more, and then a little more. So I hope this is helping to give a clearer sense of Shikantaza and just, on one hand, how much it asks of us, and from another point of view, how it simply asks us to naturally be. Not that that is simple for the complex human beings that we are. Simple doesn't mean easy. And yet simple also always means close at hand. Not complicated. We can complicate it. It is uncomplicated. So then there's the question of what happens when your mind drifts off, when the attention you're asked to bear, to bring to bear, drifts off into other places. Well, again, as with everything in practice, that's an opportunity to remember, to come back. It might sound you've heard that 1,000 times. That's because you probably needed it 1,000 times. To just come back and come back. To reconnect with the experience of your body, sitting and breathing. And practicing this way, the mind, as I've just described it, the mind will gradually, naturally settle. Naturally, because it's coming into, or beginning to once again share the naturalness of your body, the natural state of your body, which is not disconnected from anything at all. Look how it is constantly drawing on this great pool of air and breathing it out again, along with every other living being on earth. We're so utterly connected. We are sitting in a state of connectedness when we really settle in the way I've described. And as with thoughts that might arise, this is a really interesting question because often it's mistaken. Shikantaza is mistaken as a place of no thought whatsoever. That's not the case. In fact, Dogen called it non-thinking, the thought of non-thinking. Now that's very different from not having thoughts arising. To follow a line of thought, to pursue it, to then begin to replace where we are and what is happening. That is the abandonment. You've already left the track of Shikantaza in a way. You've left the path of it. But to just let thought pass through. And as it passes through, to let it be. Don't mess around with it. Don't bother it. Leave it unbothered. And unbothered, you can then let it go, because it won't hang around if you're not entertaining it and developing it and pursuing it. Thoughts are arising and falling like dust motes in the air. They don't have to be, you don't have to do anything with those dust motes or those thoughts. They are already part of the present, and any attempt to block thought, of course, is just a tense reacting. It's just tensing up again, holding yourself separate. Holding yourself separate by not liking, not wanting, not wishing for what is happening. So you let the thought be fully seen or felt. A lot of thoughts have feeling. Let that be felt. And then let it be. Let it go through. And letting it be is that allowing. Letting go is the next stage of allowing. You let the thought go. Allow it to go. Richard von Sturmer, again, has a bit of a look at this kind of problem or opportunity, because every time it is an opportunity. He says, you've run through all your transformations so many times, there's nothing left to transform. Just a half-empty salt shaker sitting on the table of a midnight diner. It's quite a mysterious but sort of lovely image of the ridiculousness, in a way, of how we go through, run through the same repeated thing. He almost makes it just as innocent as a half-empty salt shaker sitting on the table of a midnight diner. You don't have to hate it. You just have to notice. That's all it is. And this is a way of saying, you know, sometimes we're settled, sometimes we're unsettled. Each is an opportunity to practice. Each one offers more a kind of insight into practice. So this is a sort of silence at the heart of shikantaza, because let's call it not reacting, non-reactivity, very close in to not knowing. If you know what someone is feeling or thinking, what has happened, what was wrong, what should be happening, what will never happen, all the knowings that, you know, push away the opportunity to be here with what is so abundantly on offer. All of those reactions, all of those knowings are a kind of reaction, a kind of guardedness against quite being here, a shieldedness perhaps. So let's call it a kind of silence. That silence can be, it could have rippling bits of thought in it, that's fine. And sometimes the ripples of thought in a deep state of shikantaza can be very, very insightful. And watch for that as well. You can have a thought you could not possibly have had in any other state, when your mind is truly quiet and settled, as steady as and fluent as your breath. This state, Fayan, another more 10th century teacher, said, right now there is nothing to reject. If you're a little way off from now, you'll have plenty to reject. But right now, there's nothing to reject. You can experience this for yourself. The state of right now, with no even movement of rejection in you. Nothing to reject. And Kazan put it a little bit more. Kazan is Dogen's student and one of his successors. Kazan said, perhaps a little bit more directly. He said, do not find fault with the present moment. Do not find fault with it. When you look closely, it's blameless. The present moment is blameless, and everything in it. It's very hard to walk outside among the trees and find anything worthy of blame. It's so plainly blameless. So this is just, Shikantaza is allowing each moment to experience itself fully. Turn it round that way and you can see, moving out of its way, it can experience itself fully in you. You know, you become the lucky recipient of the moment experiencing itself. Richard von Sturmer again has a way of touching this kind of state. The old temple bell absorbs the heat of a summer's afternoon. Its bell beam has become a resting place for dragonflies. The valley below is at peace. Each stone contains a stone. Each stone, fully containing a stone. And that's you, a human being, fully containing a human being. Now I hope you can see that there is an act of love in this yielding of the self. It's not even hard to see that. If you think of love as a yielding of the self, and if you realise Shikantaza is a yielding of the self, how can it not be a very particularly unsticky kind of love? So every breath is in no doubt whatsoever that it is this very body is continuous with all that is. And we are, in a way, just catching up with that, and it's a wonderful thing to do. Flora Courtois, she's a very interesting character she never had a formal Zen practice, but she did have a close series of encounters with a Zen teacher, and he confirmed her as a deeply realized human being. She had a strong meditation practice, but it was very simple, which means she was a highly accomplished meditator. She said, and I like this very much, she said, we don't get enlightened at all. Rather, we enlighten each moment with true attention and complete response. You see how that shifts it across from something to strain for to something more fully to embody, and then more fully again.
Could you read it again, please?
Yes, she said, we don't get enlightened at all. Rather, we enlighten each moment with true attention and complete response. Hongzhe, again, he's sort of echoing that, but then listen to what else he says. He says the valley, you could say the valley of reality, of this very being, no difference. The valley is clear and magnanimous. The valley is clear and it echoes. So, and it echoes is very interesting. This is drawing us back into the world of cause and effect, of the cries of the world. We say the Kanzeon, or Avalokiteshvara, or Guanyin, whatever you like to call her hymn, not him, her hymn, the direction of that bodhisattva, or that emanation, that evocation of deep compassion, gradually change gender, which is pretty commonplace these days. But, so the valley is clear and it echoes because things happen. Life rises and falls. Cries are heard. If we can't hear the cries of the world right now, what the bloody hell are we doing here? You know, because the world is crying. The earth is crying. Beings are crying. Bombs are falling. Lives are shattered. Truth is mangled. The cries of the world cannot be ignored. But then I want to come back to something that crops up in the Tao Te Ching. Coming back, bringing it back to this very body, because the Tao Te Ching says, he or she who loves the world as if it were his or her own body can be entrusted with the world. And the opposite applies as well. If you cannot love the world as if it is your own body, you cannot be entrusted with it. So this is starting to point into the Bodhisattva ideal. That this very world is your own body in the widest, deepest sense. And thus, this presence in the world, this self, is service in the world. It serves the world. It can be entrusted with that. And so I'd like to, I'm just wondering about the time. When did we start this? Quite a time. Just how long have I gone? I can't.
You've gone for 55 minutes.
55 minutes?
Oh, wait, actually,
I don't believe it.
We started at 42. Oh, no.
49.
No.
49 minutes, good. We got to because I want to bring us to a really, I think, a very beautiful story which will help lead into what I want to talk about tomorrow night. Because I want to say, sometimes in Zen, this kind of mind, heart of natural compassion, which is not a hot form of love, it is a deeply discerning form. And I can talk about that, we can talk about that more tomorrow. I'll draw attention to the fact that the relaxed nature of compassion is evident in the way Kuan Yin is often depicted, like this, in what's called the pose of royal ease. One foot is raised and ready to move into the world, and the body is just beautifully relaxed and available and receptive. So there's a royal ease to be discovered. Shikantaza opens up your compassionate heart. You do hear the cries of the world. You cannot keep them out. You wouldn't even dream of doing so. You would immediately be separating yourself, undoing the very posture and intent of Shikantaza. And so tomorrow I'd like to explore some aspects of the way this compassion is a kind of a cool fire of its own. I'll come back to that tomorrow. But let me give you an example of somebody who sees the other as themselves, as not other than themselves. And this is actually a story, an account given by Nora Bateson. Now she is the daughter of Gregory Bateson, who you may have heard of. He was an extraordinary thinker about systems, about interconnectedness, at quite a scientific level in lots of cases, but also at a very deeply spiritual level. But this is her father. We don't know at first that that's who she's talking about as you read this. She just says, my father. Someone asked me once if I'd ever seen my father in an emergency situation and if I might describe how he dealt with it. At the time I replied I'd never witnessed him in any danger or in an emergency. But later I remembered that indeed I had. The fact of my not recalling the emergency is significant. We were in the car driving to my riding lesson. At that time we lived in Big Sur, California. If you've ever had the pleasure or terror of driving the Big Sur coastline on Highway 1, you'll know that that the two-lane road is characterized by majestic mountains on one side and steep, death-defying cliffs that plummet down to the Pacific Ocean on the other. We had an old, dirty white Volkswagen van. It was the 70s. We were a hippie family, and I was a long-legged, scraggly mountain child, about 10 years old, back in the back seat, free to roam around as there were no seatbelts back then. My father was driving, and while it is not part of this story, let me just say he was one of the worst drivers ever. He was always busy looking at the whales in the sea or spotting hawks. Terrifying. As we drove up the coast, we passed a hitchhiker on the side of the road who had his thumb out. Young man with a big backpack, a traveller. My father, ever the anthropologist, was interested in travellers and in people in general. He liked to pick up hitchhikers. He liked to have conversations with strangers. So we picked up this guy. A few minutes later, as we were driving along, the man suddenly had a knife in my father's side. He was demanding money. He was pumping with adrenaline. I think this qualifies as an emergency. A 2-lane road with nowhere to pull over, a kid in the back seat, and it would be another 30 years before the invention of the mobile telephone. But I never noticed. I did not see the emergency because my father's response was to cheerfully look down at the knife and then into the eyes of the hitchhiker and say in his most droll Englishness, "Well, hello, what have we here?" He was authentically calm and amused. His interest in the desperate young man had actually increased several-fold by this communication, that is, a knife and monetary demands. My father began to ask him questions. How had he come to be in Big Sur? How had he found himself in such a muddle? Through these questions and, more importantly, the tone of the questions, my father was listening and learning about how someone can get in such a twist. He was not applying a psychological trick or a technique. This was not a manipulation. He was not trying to calm the guy down. He was just interested, one human being to another. His curiosity in the young man was piqued, and his inquiry reflected that. He did not see a knife. He saw a person with a story. How would most people react? Would they fight? Would they try to get the money to him right away? Would they try to trick him? What are the scenarios that immediately play out? For most, a knife in our side would be a moment of panic. This was an emergency, but somehow it was not. As a passenger in the back seat of the van, I watched their interaction and never for 1 second felt fear in the car. There was no spike in the drama, no flutter of breath, no indication of danger at all. I still do not think of that afternoon as being life-threatening, though surely it was. After driving another half an hour, we came to a place where we would have to drop off our hitchhiker and deliver me to my horseback riding lesson. When we pulled off the road, my father opened his wallet and gave the young man a $20 bill. He wrote our home phone number on a scrap of piece of paper from the floor of the car. I know that kind of car. And gave the guy a hug. My father suggested that the man call if he found himself in trouble. These were not idle generosities to suggest goodwill. He was not faking it. The warmth and the care he felt for the traveller was genuine. I could feel that, and so, apparently, could the hitchhiker. All three of us learned a great deal from that half an hour in the VW van. As I look back now, says Nora Bateson, at that situation, I can only say that I hope one day to be able to see context as well as my father did. He wasn't young when this story took place. He was maybe 74 years along in his practice of seeing so much more than just the tip of the knife. I suppose it takes time to be able to respond to an acute situation with love that stems from complexity? Or is it the other way round? Complexity that stems from love? Perhaps there is no beginning to that loop. I will start by noticing my reactions and searching for wider, deeper edges to the complexity I am reacting to, responding to, and shift that into mutual learning. Now, how can that not be also the knife that we feel in the moment we're in, the knife of the way our world is darkening, undoubtedly darkening in so many ways, as well as lighting up in so many ways. And the complexity, I will start by noticing my reactions and searching for wider, deeper edges to the complexity I am reacting to, changing into responding to, and shift that into mutual learning. So I think that that is a quite remarkable account of, I guess you could say, of the ground of equanimity that is the very foundation of genuine compassion, an evenness, an ability to be at rest in some quite sometimes remarkable way in such a sort of acute moment. So we can come back to this tomorrow and also on Monday morning. We can look more deeply into some of these things. But I want to make sure you can see how much commonality that moment in the story has with the very posture of mind and body that is shikantaza. Hongzhu, his advice for shikantaza is graciously share yourself. You know, in every moment of just sitting, to graciously share yourself. He also said, orderly consciousness has the strength of mountains. So these are the deep gifts of shikantaza, the ones that, mature us in wisdom, and stay receptive for them. They are full of joy. They offer us joy, a joy you cannot touch as long as we're confined anxiously inside our own skulls. So let's not live and die inside that small dream. Thank you for your trouble.